Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. The deal over Iran's nuclear program has become a controversial issue in the United States. And one of the major concerns is whether the sanctions relief could result in Iran's Revolutionary Guard boosting their support for extremist allies like Hezbollah and Hamas. Joining us to discuss is Rebeccah Heinrichs with the Hudson Institute and former U.S. Ambassador to Bahrain, Adam Ereli. Ambassador, let me turn to you first. You know, when the sanctions were on and Iran was hurting economically, they started pulling back their support for the terrorist groups they were sponsoring, Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, if we have the Iran deal, they're likely to get maybe $100 billion of funding immediately. What are they going to do with that money?
Well, I think most of the money will go toward the people of Iran, frankly, reducing subsidies, or at least paying for subsidies, budget support for the Iranian government. But the important point is it will free up extra money they're either spending now or money they don't have to support extremist movements. And I think it's also important to point out that, you know, it doesn't take a lot of money. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, they don't need a lot of money. So $100 billion there's plenty to go around.
Rebeccah, is there any indication that as we embrace Iran with the Iran nuke deal, that they would give up their support for these terrorist groups in the region?
In fact, it's quite the opposite. We saw General Dunford during his confirmation hearings to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He said that we should expect some of this money to go towards terrorism. And then Susan Rice was asked the same thing a week after the deal was signed, and she said that we should expect some of this money to go towards what Iran is currently doing, which is destabilizing the region and supporting terror. So, and of course, the Supreme Leader himself has said that's exactly what they're going to continue to do. So, no, the Iranians, there's no indication that the Iranians will change their ways. And in fact, the deal states that Iran does not have to. It's not, the relief of sanctions is not contingent upon the Iranians changing their ways in this way.
Ambassador, you've been involved in negotiations before. Why was this not part of the Iran negotiations?
Very simple. I mean, from the outset, the scope of the negotiations was defined to include just Iran's nuclear power program, not its ballistic missile program, not its support for terror. And so, frankly, they would not have come to the table or agreed to negotiate if we had broadened the agenda for the negotiations.
You know, Rebeccah, the ambassador said, okay, increased support for not just Hezbollah and Hamas, but other terrorist groups, the Houthis and other terrorist groups throughout the region. How are the other countries in the region looking at this? Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, Egypt, even Israel?
Yeah, I think what the administration has done by championing this deal, it's basically kicked off what is going to be an arms race in the region, because they're going to have to arm themselves, at least conventionally, against what's going to be a much more militarily superior Iranian regime because of the arms embargo that will be lifted as well. And I'd like to say something else about what the ambassador just said about the narrow scope of the negotiations. That might be what the administration is saying now to kind of fend off criticisms, but we can see that the administration did include the lifting of the arms embargo, which is just conventional weapons, ballistic missiles. So the Iranians basically pushed and insisted on some of these things that are supposedly not related to the nuclear program to be included. So even though the Obama administration said that we wouldn't include some of these things, clearly the Iranians made sure that they were included, but only to their advantage.
You know, Ambassador, I mean, you're the former ambassador to Bahrain. How are they viewing it? I mean, how are the Saudis viewing the call that the Supreme Leader has talked about, the fall of the House of Saud?
Well, as you can imagine, not very positively. You know, I was reading an interview that Secretary Kerry gave to an Arab news channel, Al Arabiya, on Monday, and there was a very telling comment by the Secretary that I'm sure is not playing very well in Gulf capitals. He was asked, you know, what is America going to do to reassure its Gulf allies and protect its Gulf allies from meddlesome Iranian behavior in the region that will only be facilitated by the extra money coming to them? And the Secretary said, well, let me answer that with a question. How much cash do they have? And the interviewer goes, what are you talking about? And Secretary Kerry said, you know, between Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, they spend $130 billion a year on conventional weapons. Iran only spends $15 billion. So all the Gulf needs to do is spend more and work together more effectively to counter Iran.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's just crazy. And if you were sitting in one of those Arab capitals, you'd go, that's the word, that's what our ally says? Holy cow, we can't count on them. They're handing us over to the Iranians. So, short answer to your question, they are worried.
Yeah. And let me give you each one last chance to comment. Rebeccah, where are we in 6 months?
You know, we're going to see an Iran that's financially and militarily stronger than they are now. We're going to see an Iranian government that is able to oppress its people more efficiently and better than they are now with their conventional weapons. And we're going to see a financial market, international financial market that does not have the integrity that it had before because it will be tainted by dollars that will be spent on terror. So we've created a Middle East that is much more likely to have war, not less likely to have war.
Ambassador, what do you think? Where are we in 6 months?
I wouldn't disagree with my colleague. I would just add one other element, that Iran is going to do some things that are contrary to this agreement, that undermine the commitments that it has made. And one more prediction, that the West will be divided and will not be able, because of this agreement, not be able to make a firm and tough response.
Well, that's pretty dire forecasting from both Rebeccah Heinrichs and Ambassador Adam Ereli. But thanks for joining us anyway.
Thank you.
Check out foxnews.com for more on the fallout from the Iran nuclear deal. Bad pun, but true. I'm KT McFarland, and thanks for watching DEF CON.